Comic Book Savant, episode 440. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode is going to be a comics talk episode, and it's also marking the 13-year anniversary of the podcast. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to do some Q&A. I posted on the Patreon as well as the Facebook group about, any questions that you guys wanted to ask me. So we're going to do a kind of Ask Me Anything. And I hope to do more of these just so that you guys can ask any questions of me that you like, and that I can open up and, you guys hopefully through that can get to know me better in my process. And you guys feel more involved with the show. I want this to be a joint experience, and I want you to be as much as a contributor to the content that I'm posting and I'm putting out as much as I am. So I want to do more of these joint kind of ideas where we get to share different things back and forth with one another. So hopefully will be the beginning of something bigger that we'll do more often going through. But before we get into all of that, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. It's a great resource if you like content like my own and you want to find more comic book related content, shows, and podcasts. It's a one-stop shop. It's a huge directory with literally hundreds of different podcasts and different comic book related shows there. You can search by single person group or two person podcast. You can find them centric to publishers, individual characters, or even teams. So you have a lot of variety to pick and choose from. So it's definitely worth your time to stop by the Comics Podcast Network, which you can find over at comicspodcast.com. It's a great resource. And even if you're not just a listener of podcasts, but you're an aspiring podcaster, you can always contact the administrator. They have contact information on the site where you can see about if you're starting up a podcast, you want to help it get exposure. You can email them to see if you can get your show added to the directory and, help grow your audience. It's a good thing. That's basically why we all came together to start it, to help promote and cross-promote each other's shows and for everyone to help grow their audience. So it's a good tool for that if you're an aspiring podcaster as well. But with all that being said, again, this is the 13-year anniversary. Sometimes I get it mixed up when I'm talking because I'm like, yeah, this is year 13. We're going into year 14, and I'll say 13, 14. And I'm old. I'm about to be 44 soon, so my memory is not good as it used to be. So sometimes when I speak, I say it's been 13 or 14 years, but it's officially, as of now, been 13 years. So we're entering into year 14 of the podcast in this current iteration. And it doesn't seem like it. It's been a remarkable journey that I've gone through over the time, and I've experienced so much growth as a person. I've, been married in the process of doing the podcast, divorced, remarried. I've lost parents. I've lost loved ones. Had new loved ones brought into my life and born, and so it's been a very interesting ride. I never thought when I started that I would have made it this long or this far. I've met some wonderful listeners that have become friends and have become like family to me along the way that I'm very thankful for. And I'm steadily meeting you guys. You guys have been doing a great job in helping me promote and grow the show. And even what the show has become has evolved over the time that I started it. I started it as being like, wanted it to be such a hardcore, podcast, comics podcast, showing a different perspective from me being a my desire to do the podcast started from when I was first starting listening, when I forgot my first iPod. That was when iPods were first coming out. And I found comic book podcasts, and I heard voices, and I didn't hear anyone that sounded like me or was like me. And when video and you went to the websites, it was no one representative of me being African American male. It was very few. It was only really one, which was Derek Coward doing Comic Book Noise. So I wanted to change that dynamic and be that another voice to show others that, it could be different perspectives. You didn't just have to be Caucasian or whatever color. And it was funny. That was the thing that motivated me to start. But the moment after I started, it had nothing to do with my race whatsoever. It was just that I was a fan that loved comics, and I loved talking about comics with like-minded people. I think I geared it to like hardcore or serious fans, because back then it was, podcasting was an underground kind of thing. It wasn't a ton back in 2006 when I first started this podcast. It was a handful. I came in what we like to call maybe the second wave. It was the first wave of the bigger shows like Comic Geek Speak, Word Balloon, what was it, Around Comics, Comics Timing. There's like a lot of different shows, but it was like a lot of bigger shows. What was it, iFanboy, different shows that were a lot bigger. We were in the second wave where we were fans of those shows, and we reached out to those podcasts, and they helped mentor us to get us going. And it was a whole, we were like that second generation of comics podcasts that sprung from that. And a lot of them mentored and helped me get set up, and a lot of other people get up and running with their podcasts, which I then later paid forward. And I've helped over the years. I've helped put out and produce probably somewhere around 10 other podcasts that they either stopped or went on their own after some while. But I helped them produce in the beginning and helped them gain exposure over time to pay it forward like it was paid to me. So it's been a real interesting journey, and now I find myself, after doing it for so long, that I want to see the comic book fandom grow. So I've shifted more to, I guess, being like a resource, a tour guide, a teacher, I guess, and just sharing whatever I know, my love of comics from, my soon to be 44 years of existence, with anyone that is interested in comics and need help, and it's anything that like my knowledge or something I've read or anything that I can share, I just share it with whoever wants to listen in hopes I can help them experience and have fun within the hobby, like I've been been fortunate to do for so long. And a lot of people helped me along the way, because when I started this show, what I read and what I knew of comics is totally different from now. So I've, just as much as I might have given to the audience gave back to me in return. So it was a joint thing. So I have all that knowledge that now I'm putting that back out there in hopes to help with the boom of movies and TV. And there's newer people coming into the medium and they're totally lost or confused on where to start. I want to be a beacon of positivity to pull those people in, and they're not being ostracized or looked down upon for being a fan or wanting to be a fan, and being a fan or wanting to be a fan and not knowing where to start and to begin. That we welcome those people in, and we help make them feel welcome, comfortable, and help them with their journey to make it as easy as possible, because that's the only way the hobby will sustain itself and keep growing and getting larger and maybe expand out. We need a community like that, and I feel like that's what we are building together here. So I want that to grow and spread out more, so we can keep bringing more people in and keep spreading that love and positivity of the comic books and why we love them so much, and why we've made them such a big part of our lives for as long as we have, and that give them that same experience. But I'm going to get into some of the questions that I got, and some of these are some good questions. First question that I got And I don't know if they wanted me to share their names, so I'm not going to share the names of the people. I'm just going to read the questions and answer the questions to the best of my ability, because I didn't get their permission to give out their names. First question is, with the high prices of comics, is there a title or titles that you don't get because your budget, but you wish you could? And I say to that it's nothing. It's nothing really that I don't get that I really want to read. When the whole thing, when it comes to a budget, I've spoke about this before. I have limited income, due to health issues and things like that. I don't work nearly as much as I used to. I do freelance work when I can because of different health situations. You guys, if you've listened to any length of time, I've struggled with a lot of health issues, which, coming through that now and have things in the works now that, I'll be finally coming out of that for dealing with it for so many years that I'm thankful about. I had to make a lot of changes to my health and things like that. So I really do have a super limited budget. So, I have to pretty much pick my battles, pick and choose what I want to read. And I just kind of wait because I'm mainly digital. I wait till I see sales come up, and I talk about it all the time. I just, I supplement the books I read through multiple channels. I subscribe to Comixology Unlimited, and I talk about that from time to time. So, with that program, I get, certain comics available to me through Comixology as far as their subscription service. They have Marvel, DC, Image, and a lot of other different publishers that you can check out up to 50 books at one given time, read those, turn them in, and keep getting books, and those libraries grow, and they add on to those libraries month after month. I think they have like about 10 or 15,000, available books under Comixology Unlimited, and it's growing. Then I'm also subscribed to DC Universe, which they do have they have their comics library available through there, so I can read DC comics through that app as well, even though they are part of Comixology Unlimited. But the library on DC Universe is more substantial than what they have on Comixology because, again, it's their own network. And then I've learned through you guys, I've learned about services like Hoopla Digital. I did a video on the YouTube channel about it. Someone brought it to my attention in one of the comments, and then someone brought it up also at the same time in the Facebook group. So I looked into it and I did an episode about it. And Hoopla Digital is a service where you sign up to your local library for a digital library card, basically, and you can check out digital media, be it comic books, be it audio books, movies, music. It's a really cool program. And so then I get, and it's really cool because the comic book publishers put pretty recent issues and trades on there. So then I supplement, I think for where I'm at in Houston, I can, with my library, I can check out 2 books. Now, I've heard some people say they can, it depends on your library and how it's set up with Hoopla, that you can check out more books at a time. But I can get like 2 books or 2 things checked out from Hoopla every month. So I use that to read current stuff. And then I just kind of wait for sales and I bide my time. And when things come on sale and I can stockpile and get big chunks of runs of comics or trades, I do it through Comixology, because I pretty much buy my comics digitally through Comixology. And being subscribed to Comixology Unlimited, they give you discounts. So you will even get discounts off the books that are already on sale. So say if a book is $2.99 with like a 10 or 15% discount, then it'll be like $2.54 instead of $2.99 or something like that, somewhere around there. So then I save even a little bit more money. So then I can really stretch my dollar a long way. Now the next question is, since you are currently mostly digital, do you pick up the Previews magazine? No, I don't, for a couple of reasons. When I was still picking up physical comics, I did use a Previews catalog because I used the sister company or parent company actually of InStockTrades.com, which is a discount comic book service. And with that service, you would order your books through the previews catalog. So you would order your books like 2 months in advance. You would order 2 months in advance, pay a month in advance, then the month they would come out, you get those books shipped to you. So I primarily did, back then when I was ordering physical comics, I did use the previews catalog or previews magazine each month. But I hated that because a lot of times I didn't want to be spoiled on things, and because of how the solicitations were, you were constantly spoiled on upcoming storylines, and plot twists might be revealed in the cover. Sometimes they do a good job of covering it up, but sometimes maybe they'll cover up the cover, but if you read the synopsis that are listed there, it would spoil something for you, and that was frustrating sometimes because I wanted to experience it as I read it. Now, since I'm digital, I pretty much just, I will sometimes, maybe the week of, maybe the Monday or Tuesday before some books will be released, I will go to like Marvel.com and, or DC.com, and I think Image and some of the other publishers, they will send, I signed up for newsletters, so they'll send me saying what books are coming out this week. So I'll roughly know, but a lot of times I just wait till Wednesday. Comixology updates their, the Wednesday books like midday a lot of times. So, I look in the morning, see what new books are out. It's, but again, I'm normally not buying any particular issue as soon as it comes out because I really can't afford to pay $3.99 or $4.99 or $5.99 per issue. So, I tend to kind of shift. So I will say if it's the new book releases with Image and some of the independent publishers, their books might be like $3.99 or $2.99 an issue. After a month, they normally drop down to $1.99. So if I really want to get the title from them, I normally wait a month till they drop down to $1.99. Like when it comes to Marvel, DC, they constantly run sales on Comixology. Like they will have, just different sales, especially with TV shows premiering, movies coming out. They'll always have sales, geared towards promoting those characters and those things they have going on at the time. This summer they had a lot of massive sales because of the different movie releases. Then all the companies had sales going on during San Diego Comic-Con where they had, massive sales, 50% off trades and 99-cent issues, which with my discount, I was not paying 99 cents. I was paying about 84 cents an issue. So I wait till those kind of good deals come up and I will stockpile stuff that I know that I want to read and review for you guys. And I will do that. Now, you might be saying and be answering this question, well, you don't do a ton of reviews here on the channel. I kind of spread them around because sometimes when I was doing a lot of reviews, they weren't really received well, or those episodes didn't get a lot of downloads. So if you guys are not familiar, I do talk about it sometimes. I have a Patreon account. I do a separate, if you subscribe to the Patreon, it's different tiers. All you need to do to get into the Patreon is if you subscribe for even $1 a month, you get access to the Comic Book Savant Extra podcast feed. So I do reviews. I do a lot of reviews there, and I also do some reviews on the video, the YouTube channel as well. So I kind of spread it out. So for each time I do a review here on the podcast here, I normally, I try to do one on the Patreon Savant Extra feed, and then I'll try to put one out on the channel as well. And I have a whole playlist on the YouTube channel for comic book reviews. It's a whole listing of different reviews that I've done. When you go into the Patreon, I do a weekly show just like I do here on there. So like if you were joining the Patreon today, I don't know, it's like 40 some odd episodes of new podcasts you haven't heard yet that are listed over there. That I do different reviews. So I still review quite a few comics. They're just broken down different places. So I kind of plan my stuff out based on that. And like I said, spread them around, because pretty much everything I read, I will turn around and review it to let you guys know if it's good or bad. So pretty much everything I read, eventually at some point, it pops up somewhere as a trade review. I do a series on the Savant Extra feed called First Reads, where I will read the first issue of a book, and based on my impressions, I do a review, and I let you know if I'm going to continue on with the book or not. That's a episode type that I do there that is pretty successful. So I do different things like that. So everything that I buy, I purpose for later content and stuff that I'm interested in and at least checking out. But I don't use previews to do it. I just pretty much do like I would do in a comic shop. I go flip through, see what's available and see certain things that catch my eye that I might be interested in, and then I'll give it a try. But most of the time, it's once it comes down in price, because I just can't, afford $3, $4, and $5.99 an issue. It's just too much. Next question is, how do you keep up with current comics? Simply put, as you just heard, I really don't. I guess because there's so many books being published, a lot of times I still try to talk about stuff while it's still relatively new. But sometimes, because everybody reads so many different books, something's always current to somebody. And I adopted, I adopted this. My wife helped me with this a lot, because I used to feel a lot of pressure early on in the earlier years of trying to keep up with each new book as it came out. And it's just, A, I can't afford to do that. B, it's a lot, because I'm not just creating content for this podcast. I'm doing a whole nother podcast that's related to this for Patreon. Plus, I'm creating video content that's related to this for the YouTube channel. So I have to really budget and schedule my time accordingly to make sure I keep content up on all three pillars of what the comic book Savant is, and giving out helpful information to everyone. So I don't waste time trying to be a slave to different companies' releases for different books. I kind of go and gauge by feeling of what I'm feeling at the particular time and in that moment, and just whatever I pick up and read, I'm going to review it, because that in that moment is what I was interested in reading, and I just kind of go off a feeling. And sometimes I will post stuff on the Facebook group, or post stuff on the Patreon, or even put it on Instagram or even on Twitter sometimes, to just ask to kind of gauge what you guys might want to hear to help me pick from the massive stockpiles of stuff I have. When I have a hard time, saying, because I have so much, it's like, where do I start? And sometimes I get locked in by trying to figure out where to begin. But I've gotten better, and just, hey, when I get like that, I just close my eyes and kind of pick the first thing and just take it and run with it. But I stopped worrying about being current on comics. I get to them when I get to them. And I always purchase stuff later that I know that I'm interested and want to read. And I eventually do get to it. It might take a while, but eventually I do, because I will kind of rotate. I won't, I look at it from the way I create content. I don't want to read, and I probably will never read like 20 or 30 issues straight of one book. Because if I'm spending all that time reading 20 or 30 issues on that one book, then I'm looking at, okay, am I going to do one episode to review that? Then what I'm going to have for you guys the next week and the next week. So I'll read a trade, or I'll read a few issues, and then I'll review that, and then I'll go to something else to keep it fresh and to keep myself fresh. Because once you read so much of one thing, you kind of get stuck in a rut. So I like to rotate around. So I rotate like one Image book, one Marvel book, one DC book, and I try to hop around to each series to another, and then work my way back around. And then I'll do, keep that circuit constantly going, rotating books. What titles are you reading at the moment? This kind of dovetails into that. I read so much. It really just depends on my mood. I buy, another episode I do on the Patreon is called I do a comic book haul audio episode, where I talk about what I bought the previous month, and what motivated me to buy it. And again, I've gotten real good at hunting for bargains, and I use Comixology a lot, so I know to gauge their sales and when to stockpile and things like that. So I literally buy so many different titles, because and a lot of times I will ask in Facebook, or even if someone reaches out to me and hit me up through Facebook message or email, sometime I will ask, like, what are some of the books that you're reading, and I will try those books, and sometimes I like them and other times I might not. So I'm always open to picking up something new and giving it at least a try. So I read a lot. I've been keying in because I felt like I've neglected DC. I've kind of been in love with Image and the different books, like Birthright I have enjoyed. Copperhead I was getting around to. Ivan Time Walker, that's Valiant though, but I've been checking that out. Archer and Armstrong. Trying to think. I really dig the Star Wars books because they're not tied into the big universe. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I like those books because they're kind of independent, and they will piggyback some time off of one another, but they're their own like separate things. So I like those because they're not so tied into all these big events, and you got to buy that stuff. I can read those, and they're contained in their little corner over at Marvel. So I dig that kind of stuff. I read a ton of the different Star Wars books. And I've been neglecting DC, so I've been going back, checking out a lot of the new DC books. Shazam, Wonder Twins, Teen Titans, Young Justice, Naomi, a lot of stuff that I've picked up recently and starting to read on. I'm a diehard Batman fan, so I've been getting the deluxe rebirth editions of Tom King's run. I think I need to get one more to get up to the wedding. I got those. I'm stockpiling them to start knocking them out one by one to kind of get caught up on his run. So it's a ton of stuff. Like I said, I bounce around all over the place, but it's a lot of stuff that I'm liking out there. What are my favorite titles? What I just said kind of encompasses it. I'm all over the place, so it's not any one particular title that's currently out. Some of my favorite titles of all time would be Chuck Dixon and Scott McDaniel's run on Nightwing. Well, actually, this doves into another question. So I don't have any favorite current titles, and I'll tell you some of my favorite runs or series in a minute. Next question is, who are your favorite characters? And I would have to say Batman, Hawkeye, Damian Wayne, Spider-Man, and Dick Grayson. Not Rick Grayson, but Dick Grayson on Nightwing are my all-time favorite comic characters. And in Hawkeye, I will say Clint Barton and Kate Bishop. I like them both equally. So I kind of lumped them both in one because they both are technically Hawkeyes. Do you have an all-time favorite comic book series or run? I did state Chuck Dixon and Scott McDaniel's run on Nightwing Volume 1 issues. It started with a half issue that was a Wizard exclusive that you had to mail off to get from Wizard Magazine, comic book publication that came out in the 80s and 90s. That's no longer around. You had to mail, it was a certificate, and you had to pay for it and mail it, and you got it in the mail. I actually had that issue, and they did issues 1 through 40 together. McDaniels left the book. Dixon stayed on and wrote beyond that. Then they teamed back up for Nightwing Year 1, which ran through issues 101 through 106, and they did a original graphic novel, like one shot, called Nightwing the Target. So their whole collaboration together on Nightwing, all those runs, like I said, the half issue, issues 1 through 40, issues 101 through 106, and Nightwing the Target one shot. That's my favorite run. It's my favorite run of my favorite character. Another one I would have to pick is the Australian era of Uncanny X-Men. A lot of people don't know about this, but for a short time they were not in New York. They were actually in the outback of Australia. This was the mid to late 80s. Yeah, mid to late 80s when this happened. I don't have the exact, I can't get the specific number, but it's roughly around issues 229 through like 245. It was just so different from everything else that had been going on with the X-Men, especially in the 80s, and when I was really heavily into the X-Men. It was so different. It was unique. Chris Claremont was writing. It was just really good, great character development. It wasn't your standard X-Men team. You had like I think it was like Havoc was on the team. I can't remember who else was on the team. Rogue, Storm, I think. Jubilee was introduced. She was on that team. Oh, it was like the Misfit team. I just loved it. It was like a ragamuffin team of X-Men, and I really just enjoyed that run. I've been trying to go back and get that. It's not collected in not essentials, but Epic collection yet. They're getting close to in and around it, but it's not those exact issues I can't get in digital collection yet. But I'm trying to lock those down because I want to reread those books. And then another run that I like a lot, and I actually have gotten all the issues digitally. Carlos Pacheco, the artist, he actually did a stint writing and doing art on Fantastic Four. This was when they came back from Heroes Return or Reborn. He came on issues. He wrote and drew issues 35 through 50. I went back and I bought each one of them individually, digitally. Same thing with the Chuck Dixon, Scott McDaniels run. This is crazy, but this is how much I love this run. I actually had the whole series collected in physical form when I had my collection, but I went back and I have bought all those issues digitally. I don't know if I have Nightwing Target, but I do have, and I don't know if I have the half issue. I don't have the half issue. I don't. But I have issues 1 through 40 and 101 through 106. Here's what happened. Unfortunately, after I, over the years, had been buying them one by one, every time they would have a sale, I would, buy another issue, buy another issue, buy an issue, and picked it off over multiple years. Now we got movies coming out, Nightwing movies start being announced. They started, the trades for Nightwing were always really hard to get because they had super low print runs, and when that series was hot, those books sold for a lot in the on the secondary market, like on eBay and stuff like that. And I had all the trades too. I had all the single issues, then I had all the trades. Again, when I got rid of my physical comics, I sold all those books, but they had not been collected or put out digitally. Well, lo and behold, maybe about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, DC start re-releasing all those trades. And what they kind of did is they condensed the trades and kind of put more in them, and they re-released like most of this whole run in trades. So you can pretty much find all this stuff pretty easily and accessible now digitally in trades. And I think most of it is collected in about 5 or 6 volumes, and they kind of they put more issues in the supplemental material because I think Nightwing, the first volume is like A Night in Bloodhaven or something like that. That whole trade has that half issue. Let me look it up because I want to make sure I'm accurate on it. But I think like that first issue does have the half issue, which the original trade did not have it in there. So they put some of that supplemental stuff that you can't get other places included in there now. So, Nightwing Volume 1 is just called Bloodhaven. And the original trade had like issues 1 through 6 or something like that, and it was called A Night in Bloodhaven, if I remember correctly, the original printed trade. In this collection, you have not only, and it's a really good deal, it was a 4-issue Nightwing miniseries before they launched into the ongoing series that started back in 96. So you get the Nightwing 4-issue miniseries and Nightwing issues 1 through 8. And I think the half issue is included there as well, if I'm not mistaken. I think I remember it was in there because I did actually see it, and I think that half issue is included in that trade. So the bundle, the presentation is better, and you get more books in there with supplemental material. So even though I had bought all this stuff, and it would have been cheaper if I knew the trades were coming out, I could have just waited for the trades to come out digitally in this new packaging and saved a lot of money. But I love that run, so it was what it was. Next question I have is, what was your first comic, and what was the comic book that you that got you started as a comic book collector / reader and fan? I've talked about this here and there, mostly on the anniversary shows, that when I was really young, I had two cousins that were really into comic books, two older cousins, and they would, their father, my uncle, was a mailman, and he always prompted and promoted reading and stuff, and so he would always get them subscriptions to, like, a ton of subscriptions to different comic books. So they would have tons of comic books, but back in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, kids just read comics, and they didn't have them bagged and boarded. It wasn't anything precious. They just had stacks and stacks, and when they had to make room for more, they would take their old comics, box them up, and mail them to me, or if they came to visit, they would just bring me boxes of their old comics that were kind of beat up. The covers had because they would just be thrown on top of one another. They might be ripped, torn. The first comic I ever read, I don't know what issue it was, but it was a Wonder Woman comic, and I still remember it from my childhood to this day. The front page, because the cover was off of it, it had been torn off, and it was a scene with Wonder Woman fighting Cheetah on it, and that was the first book I ever read, and I was like super young, like 3 years old, something like that. I was real young, and I kept it. I had it for years, and then eventually I discarded those books because I had to make room, because they kept giving me their leftover books, so I had to make room myself. The book that really started me kind of as the collector / fan that I was now, I had that collection for a while. I think when I was around 12 or 13, I got tired of collecting comics because it was so hard to collect comics at the time. I stayed in a small rural town in North Carolina. It was called Winterville, North Carolina, and it was no comic book shop in Winterville, North Carolina. It was a gas station on the other side of town that I used to walk to, that my mom actually worked at, that had a spinner rack, and that was the only comics I had access to. The only other comic shop that I learned about later was in one of the neighboring towns, which is Greenville, North Carolina, which is the home of East Carolina University. Go ECU Pirates. That it was one comic book shop there in town, but from where I stayed in Winterville, North Carolina, that comic book shop was like, 10, 15, 20, maybe like 20 miles away. It's like a good half an hour drive or more to that comic shop. My mom was never huge into comics. She loved the fact that I loved reading, but she preferred I read like encyclopedias and books, and that's primarily what she bought me. She always made sure I had encyclopedia volumes and dictionaries and just more books to read. So I always read on a high level as a young kid. And my mom always stressed the point of, if it's something that you didn't know, because I started reading comics because my cousins handed them to me, I was reading all these bigger words that I couldn't understand as a kid. So my mom would give me a dictionary, and she's like, if you don't know what a word means, look it up, write it out, and learn it. So I used to do that. So I used to learn all these big words based on, I was reading comics and I couldn't understand some of the stuff that was being said. And she got tired of me asking her, what does this mean? And so I learned a lot. Through it. So she promoted that, but she wasn't a big fan about, hey, I'm going to go buy you comics. So it was always kind of a struggle when it came to that. It was a good and a bad, I guess, because it pushed me to read. And I learned a lot because I kept running into these big words that I didn't know, that I would research, and it helped me build good study habits, I guess, at the same time, and build my vocabulary. So again, I had ditched my comic collection when I was around 12 or 13. I was 17, junior in high school, and I started dating my first wife. We were actually on a date, and I passed by the one comic book store that was in the neighboring town to where I lived on a date, and I said, "Oh, I haven't been in here in years," and I dragged her into the comic book shop, and I bought Spawn issue 8. And that started me back to the collection that I had all the way to I got rid of my comics some years ago when I first started going digital. That was the first book that started my new collection. Now, the next book I'm going to mention is the book that really started me as a reader. I think when I bought Spawn issue 8, I was still like a fan/collector. I transitioned from a comic fan to more of a reader and more of the person that you know now as like me and the comic book savant, and led me down the path of doing this show. Started in my, you fast forward about, how many years was that? I was 17, so maybe 4 or 5 years later, I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina, living, going to college, and working at the time. Is multiple comic shops. It's a bigger town. It's about 8 or 10 colleges in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it's a lot of comic shops all around, mostly around the college campuses. They were smart enough. And it was on this one comic shop. I had never been there before. I pulled up, walked in the store. The owner was super cool. And I was looking around, and I didn't know what I was looking, what I wanted to find. And I saw a Nightwing comic, and it was Nightwing issue 7. And he was explaining to me, I was like, "Oh, who's Nightwing?" And he's like, "Oh, that's Dick Grayson, the first Robin. He's grown up now, and he's this guy called Nightwing." And I was like, "What? That sounds so interesting." I was like, "Oh, I might pick that up." And he was like, "Hey, how about this?" He was like, "If you buy this issue, I'll let you, if you don't like it, bring it back. I'll give you your money back. No harm, no foul. But just try it, see if you like it. And if you do, you come back, give me some more business, and I'll set you up or whatever." So we did. And I did. I loved it. And it really trickled to, that ended up leading to me start reading DC Comics, because I really, from the spinner rack as a kid, and a lot of books that were handed down to me, they were mainly Marvel more so than DC. It was some DC sprinkled in, but primarily Marvel comics. So I was a Marvel kid. So this started me in my 20s as being a DC head. So I started with Nightwing, and I think I went from Nightwing to Mark Waid's Flash to Ron Mars's Green Lantern with Kyle Rayner to Green Arrow by Chuck Dixon to Batman by Chuck Dixon to Robin by Chuck Dixon to Nightwing from Chuck Dixon. He was writing on the Batman books at one point. Detective Comics by Chuck Dixon. Then like things like Cataclysm happened and No Man's Land, and this was heavy into DC from that point on. I got hooked up as a project because I was going to school for web design. I had to do a website for a project, and I decided to do the one thing I was very interested in at the time, which was the Nightwing book by Chuck Dixon and Scott McDaniels. So I made a site. My first website I ever made was a Nightwing fan site called The Night As I See It, and it was a total Nightwing fan page that I ran for years. And from there, I got attention online in the comic book community as, in the air quotes, an authority on Dick Grayson Nightwing. I got asked to write reviews for a DC-centric fan page that they were needing people to do reviews. And I was always reviewing the Nightwing comics anyway. So I can't even remember what the site is at this point. But I wrote reviews for a few years for that site. Then I stopped, and I still kept maintaining my site. I did that till that kind of phase kind of faded out. And then eventually I missed doing it and being related to comics. So you fast forward to around 2006 when I discovered podcasting. It just reignited that love that I had when I was doing the fan page, and I figured I would parlay it into this new medium called podcasting. So it led me down that road. So I think if I probably never had picked up that Nightwing issue 6 that day I walked into that comic book shop, I probably would not be here talking to you now about it, doing this podcast. Because that particular issue led me to that path that led me to doing this here now. So that was long-winded as all get out, but, I got to it eventually. But that's what got me here. Those books are the most significant books, I would say, to me and my journey into getting here. Those are the most important comics that I can remember. Is there anything you would change about the industry? I think the biggest thing that I would change in the comic industry right now is for companies to make everything they print, even things like omnibuses, oversized hardcovers, all that, make everything available digitally, as well as print. I would like to see when you buy an omnibus, you have a little code in there that you can redeem it digitally as well. They do it in the comics. I feel like they can do it in the collected editions as well, because not everyone has the room or space for those books, and they might want to, be reading it in bed, and you can't hold the omnibus over your head reading it in bed. You're going to kill yourself if it falls on your face. So I feel like at this point, they're being negligent and not giving us digital codes to collected editions and making those volumes. I would love an omnibus digitally, because I'd rather spend the money on getting that and can take it anywhere with me instead of lugging around a big book. I did that before. It's not fun carrying like 3 oversized hardcovers in your backpack, and you're going down to Mexico or Jamaica, and you're going through customs and you're lugging those books around. I literally did it, and that's what led me to digital, because I could never figure out what I wanted to read, so I couldn't just bring one book because I might not be in the mood to read that. So I had to carry at least 3, so I had some variety. And going through customs and walking through the airport, lugging those books around because you don't want to pack them in your luggage because you're scared they'll get damaged, so you want to keep them on your person. It wasn't fun. So I feel like that's one thing about the industry. Whatever you print, make available digitally. You have the files, so you really, at this point, you have no excuse not to do it. So that's the biggest thing I feel like I would change in the industry. Is there any comic books that you have never read but you really want to read? Yes, the Dark Phoenix saga. You might be listening and say, he's lost all his credibility. It's so many books and stories out there. That was before I was really into comics, that passed me by, but I know they're like staples and, or classics that I haven't got a chance to read, that I look forward to reading. Dark Phoenix is one, because it's available now through Comixology Unlimited, so I can check it out and read it for free. Then I finally probably will sit down and finally read it. Like, I had never read Infinity Gauntlet till maybe a few months before Infinity War came out, and I finally read that for the first time, and I was glad I did when I finally read it. But it took me that long before I had ever read that. And I guess we all have some book like that people call a classic that they've never had a chance to read or get to, or maybe didn't know about until recently because a movie or something was being based upon it and they didn't hear about it. Next question is, what is your favorite superhero team? My favorite superhero team, this was a hard one, but I had to settle on the Avengers. Some of my favorite comic book stories of all time center around the Avengers. Avengers Under Siege, which is an epic collection now. Love that story from the mid-'80s. Avengers Forever, I've talked about that multiple times. One of my favorite all-time Avengers comic books of all time. Yeah, so I had to go with the Avengers for sure for my favorite superhero team. Is there any title I would love... next question. Is there any title you would love to be made into a film or TV series? And my pick was Rising Stars by JMS, John Michael Straczynski. It was an Image comic he did in the 90s to early 2000s over at Image. It was a sprawling epic that I can't remember how many issues it went, but the general premise behind it was a meteor hit, and these kids were the radiation that I think emitted from this asteroid crashing on Earth, is that these women in this surrounding area, other women that were pregnant or conceiving at that time, this radiation affected them, and all of them ended up having kids that were affected by the radiation and developed some type of superpower. And I think it was like 100 of them or 101 of them. And they were good ones, they were bad ones. They tried to corral these kids, train them, have them together. But it evolves over time as they grow up. One guy's kind of like a Batman. One guy's kind of like a Captain America. Is an evil guy that's going out and like starting to go around killing them. And it's this whole murder mystery thing. And it's this big sprawling epic that I can't remember. It's collected in like 2 compendium editions. It was talked about for the longest time that it was going to be made into a movie or a show. And what happened, the book was so notoriously late constantly that it never really came to fruition. But it was always being talked about that they were gonna, they're gonna make this into, it's gonna be a movie. And it was like, how long would the movie would be? It kind of lost steam after a while. It had a lot of top writers on it, and then they were being late, and people were dying for the book to come out. So then he just JMS to start getting anybody to work on it to keep the book out. But it was so late, and it kind of imploded upon itself just because it couldn't keep up the schedule for to the fans. I mean, literally it would be like months between, in between issues. So it started in like 99, and I think it ran to like 2009. Let's see. It's collected in 2 compendium editions. I looked it up here on Comixology. So it's Rising Stars Compendium Part 1. It has issues 1 through 24, issue 0, issue half, in the prelude issue. And let's see. Then the second compendium consists of Rising Stars Bright, Rising Star Voices of the Dead, and Rising Stars Untouchable. So that's the rest of the series. So it's about, between the 2 compendiums, you're looking at about 1,000 pages, because I think the volume 1 compendium is like 658 pages, and the second one is about 349 pages. And it was just like so delayed. So it like I said, it collapsed on itself. It was like one of the hottest comics when it first debuted, and then it was like between issues, it just got so late that it just lost steam. But the concept was there, and it would have been cool to, at the time, really have seen that on such an epic scale. But it was going to be problematic to make. Nowadays, you probably could make that as a show or a movie, and I would like to see it approach, but I don't even think anybody would be interested in a property anymore, because most people probably don't even remember Rising Stars nowadays. But at the time, it was like the hottest new thing that was out in comics. Last question for the Q&A is there any character that you feel is underused or underrated and wish that you would see more of? And I would say yes, Batwing. I really dug the Batwing character from the New 52. He came out of the pages of Batman Incorporated by Grant Morrison. His name was David. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, but he was a African police officer, and he became Batwing, and he was fighting corrupt policemen and militia in South Africa. And then he was replaced by John Fox, which was Lucius Fox's son. I want to finish off that series. I was reading that series. It ended up getting canceled. I don't know what they're doing with that character. But I was reading that New 52 series when it came out, and then I just stopped reading all the stuff, New 52 stuff. It was just so much to keep up with. So I think I got to that midway point of the series. I think it went 35 issues or 34, somewhere in the 30s. and it ended, and I think I have half of it. So when I was asked this question and I was thinking about characters, I thought about that character, and it made me realize I didn't finish the series. So I earmarked those trades to finish off that series, and I'm going to do a spotlight issue on that character later, because I thought it was cool to have an African American, a African American Batman, and he was in South Africa, so it was totally separate from the DC universe. But then I haven't read the part. I was right at the part where David was about to end his tenure, and John was going to tenure as Batwing, and John taking over. So I'll get that in the rest of the series. And like I said, I'm going to do a whole spotlight episode on Batwing later, because I thought it was a really cool concept, and it was really cool seeing a different setting of South Africa and dealing with the different issues over there. It was a whole different, unique perspective that we had never seen Batman come from, and it was being the first African American affiliated Batman character. That was really cool and different, and I wish they do something more with the character down the road, because I thought that was unique, and again, representation is everything, and I thought that was just cool, because I never would have thought. So when the New 52 came out and all the announcements were made, I was like, they're doing a Black Batman, the Batwing, what? And it's a really really cool character. He did even have an appearance in the DC animated film. I think it's Batman Bad Blood. He's actually in it, but it's the John Fox version of him, if I remember correctly, Lucius's son. But that is all the questions that I had. I hope I answered them to your satisfaction. I just was honest as possible with them. I want to do more of these. So if it's any questions that you want to ask, you can always email me at comicbooksavant@gmail.com, and just put in the subject line Q&A, and I'll just gather questions for the next time. If you guys want, I could do these episodes once a month or once every other month, and just gather questions and answer the different questions you guys have for me. I think it was really fun, and it made me think about some things that I hadn't really thought about before, hadn't really put to thought, because you just read and do what you do what you do, but you never really think about it till you pose with a particular question. So it made me really think and narrow down some things and revisit some things as well. So as always, check me out on social media at Comic Book Savant on Instagram and on Facebook. Instagram and Twitter. On Facebook, facebook.com/Comic Book Savant. And then if you want to join the Facebook group, please do that so we can interact with you and get to know you. It is facebook.com/groups/The Savant Society, one word. Once you go there, just request to be a part of the group. As soon as I see your request, I approve you, and you'll get right in, and you'll be able to post immediately. That's the thing. Definitely, if you're interested in becoming a patron and supporting the show and getting access to the exclusive Comic Book Savant Extra podcast, again, you can contribute as little as $1 a month and get access to that feed. If you contribute more, it's even more bonuses that I have in different tiers. So you can check that out. You can see it at patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. And then also, we have the Teespring store where I have t-shirts and stickers and stuff like that. That is teespring.com/Comic Book Savant. And that's the store there. The links are all on the website as well at comicbooksavant.com. But that's all I have for you guys. Again, I appreciate and could not do this without your guys' help and support. You've been wonderful. I feel like this has been a great year with all the ups and downs that I've had with my health over the past 2 years. You guys have been there and held me down and helped support me and encourage me to keep pushing forward. And I'm getting to a point where, some of those hurdles are going to be gone soon, thankfully. So I'm in a good place. I'm in a good place creatively. I'm in a good place all the way around. It's because you guys have helped me do that. Plus with my wife and my family. And my friends, which I consider you a part of being my friends and family as well. So with you guys' help, it's helped me a lot through the whole process. So I appreciate everything you guys do. That's all I have for you guys for this episode. I will talk to you guys soon. And this is the Comic Book Savant. And I'll talk to you next week. Until then, you guys take care. Be safe.